Winter 1944. The shattered town of Aachen lies silent under falling snow, its streets littered with the remnants of 1,000 firefights. Among the rubble, a squad from the U.S. 1st Infantry Division moves cautiously through the ruins of a German strongpoint. The air smells of cordite and brick dust. In the corner of a collapsed cellar, Private Harold Simmons bends down and lifts a rifle unlike any he's ever seen. It's heavier than the M1 Garand slung over his shoulder, shorter, darker, with a curious curve to its magazine. Stamped into the receiver are the words MP-44. At first, the men think it's another submachine gun, perhaps a variant of the MP-40. But when they cycle the action and see the unfamiliar intermediate cartridge, they realize this is something different. A weapon that fires faster than a Garand, farther than a Thompson, and handles smoother than a bar. They've just encountered the StG-44, the world's first true assault rifle. Reports of these new German guns had filtered through intelligence channels for months, mostly dismissed as exaggeration. The idea of a single rifle that could deliver both precision and automatic fire seemed improbable. Yet here, on the frozen Western Front, American soldiers are holding one, and they're impressed. In after-action notes later collected by U.S. ordnance officers, soldiers described the weapon as remarkably stable, balanced in recoil, and ahead of its time. When they tested captured examples, they discovered it could fire in controlled bursts at 500-600 rounds per minute, using the 7.92x 33 Mkurs round, a revolutionary intermediate cartridge that combined the range of a rifle with the manageability of a submachine gun. One sergeant reportedly told an intelligence officer, "If the Germans had this weapon in numbers back in Normandy, we'd still be fighting on the beach." The StG-44 was, in every measurable way, a weapon from the future, designed for the kind of close to medium-range combat that defined modern warfare. Its gas-operated mechanism, curved magazine, and select fire capability created a new category of infantry weapon that no army in the world had fielded in significant numbers before. American troops, often dismissive of German over-engineering, found themselves quietly admiring the practicality of this design. It was neither overly heavy like the MG-42, nor mechanically delicate like the FG-42. It was quite simply the rifle every infantryman wanted to carry. Yet behind this innovation lay years of bureaucratic struggle, political interference, and hidden development, a story of how one of the most advanced weapons of the war was nearly buried under its own secrecy. As American engineers at captured arsenals began tracing the rifle's lineage, they uncovered a tale that started years earlier, in the ruins of another battlefield far to the east, where Germany's war against the Soviet Union forced a radical rethink of infantry tactics. The StG-44, it turned out, had not been born from luxury or ideology, but from necessity. The story of the StG-44 begins not in a factory, but in frustration. By 1941, as German troops pushed deep into the Soviet Union, their infantry doctrine was already showing cracks. The bolt-action Karabiner 98K, reliable, accurate, but slow, could not match the fire volume of Soviet PPSH-41 submachine guns pouring out of Moscow's arsenals. German squads, once dominant through precision and discipline, were being outgunned in the ruins of Stalingrad and the forests around Smolensk. From this battlefield imbalance emerged a radical idea, a new class of rifle, capable of both sustained fire and long-range accuracy. Two competing designs, the MKB-42H by Heinel and the MKB-42W by Walther, became the foundation of what would later be called the StG, or assault rifle. Both fired the experimental 7.92x 33 Mkurs cartridge, a shorter round that bridged the gap between a pistol bullet and a full-sized rifle cartridge. The weapons designers, led by Hugo Schmeisser at CG Heinel, envisioned a firearm for the real battlefield, not the parade ground. It would allow soldiers to fire in bursts at 200 meters, the average range of infantry combat, while maintaining accuracy beyond what any submachine gun could offer. But inside the Nazi command, innovation was often at war with ideology. Adolf Hitler, obsessed with heavy weapons and strategic wonder weapons, saw no need for an entirely new rifle class. He viewed the project as a waste of resources during a time when steel and production lines were stretched thin. His orders were clear: discontinue the program. German engineers, however, quietly ignored him. They renamed the project to disguise its purpose, calling it the MP-43 or Machine Pistol 43, implying it was merely a submachine gun. Production continued in secret. Early batches were tested by elite units on the Eastern Front, particularly in the hands of soldiers of the 1st SS Panzer Division, Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler, and frontline Wehrmacht troops battling around Kharkov. The results were stunning. Reports from the field flooded in: superior in firepower, reliable in mud and cold, dramatically improved squad effectiveness. Soldiers armed with the MP-43 were able to lay down withering fire that Soviet infantry could not match. A squad equipped with just 2 of these new rifles could dominate a firefight that once required a machine gun. When Hitler finally saw the results and the enthusiasm of his own troops, he reversed course. In 1944, during a demonstration at Rastenburg, he reportedly exclaimed, "It is truly a StG, a storm rifle." The name stuck. The weapon was officially redesignated StG-44, and mass production began too late to change the outcome of the war, but soon enough to change the future of infantry combat. Yet its debut came at a desperate time. The Reich was collapsing, fuel was scarce, and Allied bombing crippled production lines. Still, on the battlefield, wherever it appeared, it altered the balance of firepower. By the summer of 1944, the StG-44 had reached the front lines in meaningful numbers. In the shattered villages of the Eastern Front, it was no longer just an experiment, it was a weapon rewriting infantry doctrine in real time. German soldiers who had once relied on bolt-action rifles now wielded select-fire weapons capable of unleashing controlled bursts of automatic fire at 300 meters. In the close-quarter chaos of trench systems, burned-out factories, and forest skirmishes, it became an equalizer. In the hands of the grenadiers of Army Group Center, the rifle showed its true potential. Soviet reports from the 3rd Guards Army near Kovel complained of German infantry firing without pause, describing engagements where enemy fire seemed continuous, though only rifles were visible. For the first time in modern warfare, individual riflemen possessed the sustained firepower once reserved for light machine guns. The StG-44's intermediate cartridge was its heart and genius. The 7.92 by 33mm Kutz round was compact enough to allow controllable automatic fire, yet powerful enough to penetrate cover and armor up to 300 meters away. Compared to the 7.92 by 57mm Kutz full-power Mauser cartridge, it produced less recoil and required smaller, lighter ammunition. Soldiers could carry nearly double the ammunition load without extra weight, a tactical advantage that changed the rhythm of infantry combat. Field reports emphasized how this new rhythm altered engagements. Instead of firing single, deliberate shots, German squads now advanced by laying down steady streams of suppressive fire, bounding forward in coordinated bursts. The rifle's 30-round detachable magazine turned every man into a mobile base of fire. Its gas-operated mechanism and robust stamped steel construction allowed it to perform reliably even in the mud and cold of the Eastern Front. The simplicity of the weapon's internals impressed even captured Soviet ordnance officers, who described it as efficiently engineered for war, not parade. The gun's wooden stock and pistol grip gave it a natural ergonomic feel that was years ahead of its time, balanced, intuitive, and remarkably easy to control in automatic fire. When the weapon reached the Western Front later that year, American and British troops began encountering it during the battles for Normandy and the Ardennes. Soldiers from the U.S. 2nd Armored Division reported being pinned by short, violent bursts of rifle fire that were unlike anything they had faced before. Intelligence officers soon confirmed that the Germans had indeed fielded an entirely new class of small arms. Even Allied commanders took note. In captured briefings, U.S. ordnance analysts wrote, "The German StG-44 combines the characteristics of a carbine, submachine gun, and rifle." It represents a significant development in infantry armament, but this remarkable design came too late to turn the tide. Only about 425,000 units were produced before war's end, far too few to equip the entire Wehrmacht. In the ruins of the Reich, many rifles were destroyed, lost, or captured before they could reach the front. Still, those who faced it remembered the experience vividly. American troops described its sound as distinctive, sharp, and rhythmic. Soviet veterans later admitted that the weapon changed the psychology of combat, forcing them to adapt tactics in real time. When the first captured StG-44s reached Allied intelligence units in late 1944, the reaction was immediate and surprisingly respectful. American ordnance officers at Aberdeen Proving Ground in Maryland examined the rifle with the same fascination they had once reserved for the German Tiger tank. It was not just another enemy weapon, it was something entirely new. Field units had already encountered it firsthand. Soldiers of the 90th Infantry Division near Saarlottern recovered several StG-44s after fierce street fighting. In their after-action reports, they described being pinned by sustained rifle fire unlike any we'd heard before. The rhythm was steady, mechanical, almost like a typewriter compared to the crack of a Garand. When they captured one intact and fired it, they understood why the Germans fought so stubbornly to defend them. At Aberdeen, technicians noted the rifle's gas-operated tilting bolt, its curved 30-round magazine, and its clever use of stamped steel parts, a design philosophy that emphasized speed and practicality over aesthetic perfection. In their official report, U.S. engineers wrote, "The German StG-44 represents a radical new approach to infantry armament. Its cartridge, construction, and controllable automatic function are years ahead of any comparable U.S. rifle." Frontline GIs agreed. Many preferred the Garand's reliability and familiar feel, but when they tested captured StGs, admiration replaced skepticism. The weapon's recoil was gentle, its burst control excellent, and its sight simple but effective. You could put 5 rounds on a target before your Garand man fired his second, one infantryman later recalled. Even American officers admitted the concept was sound. The U.S. Army Ordnance Department had been experimenting with similar ideas, most notably the M1 carbine, a lightweight semi-automatic weapon chambered in .30 carbine. But compared to the StG-44, the carbine lacked stopping power and range. The StG bridged the gap perfectly. It could deliver full auto fire at short range yet stay effective out to 400 meters. Captured examples were also sent to British and Soviet intelligence for analysis. The British described it as a weapon of considerable merit, while Soviet engineers took the design more seriously than anyone realized at the time. Within years, its influence would echo through Mikhail Kalashnikov's AK-47, a rifle that shared its core philosophy of intermediate ammunition, select fire, and rugged construction. For American analysts, the StG-44 was both a revelation and a challenge. It highlighted that the U.S. military, despite its industrial might, had not yet produced a true assault rifle. The Garand was powerful but heavy. The Thompson and M3 grease gun were handy but short-ranged. The StG-44 combined their strengths into one revolutionary platform. As Allied factories examined its blueprints, they recognized the uncomfortable truth. The enemy had created the template for the modern soldier's weapon. When the war ended in 1945, the StG-44 lay scattered across Europe in trenches, bunkers, and abandoned trucks. Many were collected by Allied intelligence units, others hidden by retreating German soldiers. What no one yet realized was that this rifle would become the blueprint for nearly every modern infantry weapon that followed. For the first time in history, a firearm had achieved the perfect middle ground. Lightweight, selective fire, and chambered for an intermediate cartridge optimized for real battlefield ranges. The StG-44's concept broke with centuries of tradition, rejecting the idea that rifles must hit at 1,000 yards and embracing the truth that most combat happened within 300. That shift changed everything. The Soviets were the first to act. Their engineers studied captured StG-44s in detail, impressed by its short-stroke gas piston and controllable recoil. Within 2 years, Mikhail Kalashnikov began work on a design that would incorporate similar ideas but adapted to Soviet simplicity. The result was the AK-47, introduced officially in 1949. The AK used a heavier piston, looser tolerances, and a 7.62x39 cartridge, but the resemblance was unmistakable: curved magazine, intermediate round, and select fire capability. In the West, American designers drew different lessons. The U.S. Army's Ordnance Department, reviewing post-war reports, concluded that the StG's concept was sound, but they were reluctant to abandon the powerful .306 cartridge so soon after victory. Their first response was the M14 rifle, essentially a modernized Garand firing a shorter 7.62 NATO round in automatic mode. Yet in practice, it was uncontrollable on full auto, proving that the Germans had been right all along about intermediate ammunition. The next leap forward came in the 1960s with the M16, firing the small, high-velocity 5.56x45 cartridge. Lightweight, select fire, and magazine-fed, it embodied the same core philosophy as the StG-44, firepower at practical ranges, not theoretical ones. American soldiers in Vietnam often described their M16s the way German troops once spoke of the StG: fast, maneuverable, and devastating in close combat. StG-44 also influenced European weapon design. The FN-FAL in Belgium, the G3 in West Germany, and the SIG 510 in Switzerland all borrowed aspects of its ergonomics and gas systems. Even rifles developed decades later, such as the AK-47 and G36, trace design ancestry back to the StG's innovations in gas operation and stamped steel efficiency. Despite its brilliance, the StG-44 was doomed by logistics. It arrived too late in too few numbers to alter Germany's fate. The war's collapse crippled production, factories were bombed, materials scarce, and transportation networks shattered. Only about 425,000 units were made, compared to the millions of M1 Garands and Mosin Nagants fielded by the Allies. Yet the legacy of the StG-44 survived the Reich that created it. Its silhouette, curved magazine, compact frame, pistol grip became the universal symbol of the modern soldier. The weapon that Hitler once dismissed as unnecessary had quietly defined the next century of warfare. When American troops first examined the StG-44 on the battlefield, they saw not just another enemy weapon, but evidence of a mindset they quietly respected. In a war filled with propaganda and hate, it was rare for soldiers to admit admiration for the other side. Yet when they handled this rifle, its weight, balance, and precision, they recognized something familiar, craftsmanship born from necessity and genius under pressure. In letters, home, and post-war interviews, U.S. infantrymen often spoke about that German rifle that fired like a dream. It was a grudging respect, the kind earned only on the battlefield. They knew the men who wielded it had been their enemies, but they also knew those men had faced the same fear, fought the same exhaustion, and wanted the same thing to survive. The StG-44 became a symbol of that unspoken fraternity of soldiers, divided by flag but united by experience. American ordnance officers echoed that sentiment. Their technical admiration transcended rivalry. In an internal report written in 1946, one major described it as the logical end of the rifle's evolution: compact, effective, efficient. The comment could have applied to the weapon or to the men who created it, engineers working in bombed-out factories, fighting deadlines as the world around them collapsed. After the war, captured StGs were used by various forces: Czechs, Yugoslavs, East Germans, and even some Syrian troops during the 1950s. They served quietly in conflicts where ideology mattered less than reliability. Decades later, American advisors in the Middle East would occasionally encounter them again, rusted but still functional, a testament to design born from desperation and brilliance. For many U.S. veterans, the StG-44 remained a memory of respect earned the hard way. In reunion interviews from the 1970s, veterans of the 1st Infantry Division and 2nd Armored Division often brought up the weapon unprompted. One said, "We hated what it stood for, but we knew it worked, and that counted for something." Even General George S. Patton, who famously called the M1 Garand the greatest battle implement ever devised, reportedly acknowledged the StG-44 as a clever piece of engineering, too clever, perhaps, for the men who made it. His remark captured the paradox: Germany's technical excellence was unmatched, but it could not compensate for its moral and strategic collapse. In the end, admiration for the StG-44 was not admiration for the regime that birthed it. It was respect for innovation, for the soldiers who carried it, and for the enduring truth of warfare, that the best ideas often rise from the hardest lessons. When the guns finally fell silent in 1945, and American troops marched past surrendered German units, some noticed those strange rifles slung over enemy shoulders. A few even exchanged glances, brief nods of acknowledgement that needed no translation. They understood what it meant to hold such a weapon, to trust it, to depend on it, to survive by it. The StG-44 had changed the face of infantry combat forever. And though born in the service of a doomed empire, its design became the language of modern warfare, respected, studied, and emulated by the very armies that defeated it.